Hello, everyone, and welcome in. My name's Bryce Koon here on the Crowded Booth, and we've got a loaded Wednesday night show. We are just over 11 days away from the start of college football. Week 0 is almost here. And tonight, we're going to talk conference title picks. Who's going to get there and who's going to clinch a spot potentially in the college football playoff. All Power 4 conferences on tonight's episode of the Crowded Booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.
Welcome in and welcome in. New look and new layout for 2024. My name is Bryce Koon alongside Ralph Leary and Will Mandis. We appreciate you tuning in, whether it's live here on X and YouTube, or you might be tuning in after the fact on our YouTube channel. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and check us out, all the content we have there. And then certainly not last or least, but it is last. It's not least. I don't know. Words are already hard. Make sure to check us out on the podcast platforms everywhere we go. Words are hard. Ralph there with the lower third graphic. But hey, we're getting ready to rock and roll on what should be a fun prediction season episode. We're going to talk conference title picks. Who's going to make it to each of the Power 4 conference title games? Who's going to win? And obviously, you have to think these are going to be the top potential 4 seeds in the college football playoff as well. Obviously, on Monday, we're going to unveil each of us our own 12-team playoff. And then, fellas, a week from today, we bring back best bets. And we kick off another season. Now, I will say this season, I will allow week 0 to be used. Last year, I took Navy plus like 30 and Navy plus whatever.
It was 23 and a half.
It was brutal. That was awful. So we're starting clean, starting fresh, and it's going to be a lot of fun. But any disclaimers you guys want to get out of the way before we talk conference title picks?
No disclaimers. None. I don't need any excuses. I don't, no matter what's been said, no matter what people want to say, I don't back down from takes. I will take my takes to the grave. I don't make excuses for them. I don't make qualifiers for them. I stand by them, and that needed to be said.
You're right.
I agree with Will there. Honestly, it's just why not? We're not professionals here. We don't exactly know everything. It's just all opinions here.
It's all opinions. SEC Infielder Kid with the great work, boys. Chris Phillips will be on the show next week. In fact, we're going to be talking with him. He says Will's got a pawpaw hat on. Jonesy in the chat, and hope you don't put the money on that. Well, we might have to see. We'll see what we're going to do. Don't listen to the comment commies. I love it. All right, so let's rock and roll. Let's kind of dive into this. Well, first off, we got to talk about our presenting sponsor, everyone, betonline.ag. That is until Ralph finds us a new sponsor. I know, BetOnline's fantastic. They do great work, and that will be all of our lines for the 2024 season are going to be based off of what BetOnline sets them. So, look, you might have your specific company. That's what we're going off of, and that's what we're going to get. Ken Hendricks. Already in the comment section, we don't know everything. Wise words from Ralph. You don't, and you got to admit when you don't, and we're trying to be better about that. So,
admit nothing, deny everything.
Recruiting there for Will. No, I'm just kidding. It's a joke. It's all in good fun. All right, let's lock it and let's lock it, cock it, and restock it. All right, let's roll with conference number 1. Ralph, I would like to start off with whatever's at the top of the list. Let's see what we got here.
I think it's me. It's been like Monday's show again. So
okay, SEC title game. Take it away, Ralph.
I'm going with the 2 favorites this year. I feel like both these teams are just they didn't really have to restock much. They basically had the same team from last year. Reloaded, offensively and defensively, got some good transfers in. Obviously, Isaiah Bond's at Texas now. It's interesting. This year we have adding Texas and Oklahoma because 3 years ago you would think Georgia, Alabama every single year was going to happen, and then Nick Saban retires last year, and so we have a new coaching staff in Alabama, and I'm not thinking Alabama's going to be at the top of the game this year. Not saying they're going to be bad, just saying they're not going to be the number 2 team in the SEC. I think Texas is, looking for a playoff run again. High hopes coming to the SEC, and just wanted to, be there. They don't want to go into the new conference and struggle. But Georgia, look, they're so good now. Kirby Smart is the best coach in the country right now, I think. I don't think I should say that I think that because I think everyone else would agree with that situation right now. And they just keep adding every year. If it's not the transfer portal, it's the recruiting, man. They bring in 4 and 5 stars that pan out. I mean, you're talking about, to me, I think the best defensive lineman, in the country this year, outside linebacker-ish, if you want to say, is Michael Williams. He's going to be an absolute hard stop, this year for offensive lines. He's going to be a playmaker back there for the Georgia. Their secondary returns a lot of starters again, and they're a veteran-led team once again and super talented at every position. So I got Georgia, Texas. I might be the only one who has Texas, but I think we all agree on the one part is we'll be seeing Georgia probably in the SEC championship game.
Yeah, I think that's a common theme.
A lot of common themes in this.
There actually are. We're on the same page. I would say probably there's one conference where we're not. There's one conference where we all have the same pick, and we can talk about that obviously towards the end. It's the one that I refused to talk about the other night.
I was surprised I will, honestly.
Here's my thing. I don't want to steal what Will and I are going to go with here because it is similar. I believe we have half of this.
No, we have the same. We have the same one.
Pick.
Okay, so we've got one half of what Ralph has.
Yes, we do.
We've got that. My question on Texas: you lose your top 2 running backs in the span of a week for the season. Can you overcome that? My biggest thing is I think Quinn Ewers might be the biggest wild card in college football this year. He has to be a guy that can go win you football games and be dynamic. He'd do that anyways. But, guys, he doesn't have the weapons that he had last year. Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, the tight end that they had last season. Like, they had some dudes that are in the NFL now. The problem for me is you still have some guys, but I don't think it's as good as what they had last year. So if Ewers takes a step up, yes. Now, you add in the fact that he lost with his receivers, and Will, I'll let you kind of take this next one here because it does – it does. We have the same one, so we can discuss this in kind of unison.
Yeah, but real quick on Texas. I'm not worried about their passing game. I think Sark, he's still got weapons at receiver and at tight end, and he's got the quarterback. And if Quinn Ewers struggles, he's got Arch Manning behind him, who all reports say he's just as good as Quinn Ewers, just not as developed at the stage Quinn Ewers is at, but still just as good. But everybody spreads out 4 or 5 wide receivers. You still have to run the football. You still have to run it. I'm worried about Texas's running game now. I worry about their depth now, losing those two top running backs. So that for me is why I think they will not make the SEC title game.
Yeah, and before we get to yours, they did bring in, I want to get these names right, Isaiah Bond, Matthew Golden, Silas Bolden, and Amari Nyblack. So they bring in 4 options to replace 4 NFL players: Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, Jordan Whittington, and Jatavian Sanders. So,
those 4 you just mentioned, I think there's at least 2 NFL players out of that 4 that they brought in.
Oh, yes. And so if it hits, maybe they're in Atlanta.
Yeah, and they don't even have to be NFL level players for Texas to finish top 2 in the SEC or to make the playoff. They don't have to be that good. But that's asking a lot because I worry about how they're going to run the ball. You still have to run the ball.
Yeah, you got to be able to run the ball, especially in what we believe to be the best conference in the country and the most grueling in terms of week to week. I don't know if you could put on your shoulders week in, week out to go win you football games. All right, so Ralph says Georgia, Texas. Ralph, who is your winner of the SEC championship? Or do we want to save that for Monday?
No, we can go ahead. I think we can say it now.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm going to go Georgia. I think Georgia's just the most complete team out there.
So here, another question for you, Ralph. Does Georgia go 2-0 against Texas this year? Did they win that regular season matchup in Austin?
Yeah, I think they do. I think Georgia's the only team in the country, I believe, that can go to about any place right now and either compete to the very end or win those games on the road.
Yep. So looking at Georgia's schedule, September 28th, they go to Alabama. Then they host Auburn. They host Mississippi State. October 12th, and then they head to Texas October 19th. So they're home for 2 weeks. We talked about travel schedule quite a bit on Monday's show. So it's a good travel schedule for Georgia. I think where that Texas game falls in the schedule is in a good spot for them. They can. I think they can go in and beat Alabama. Say that again.
they travel back-to-back weeks. So after Mississippi State, they go to Texas and then go to Jacksonville for the Florida game.
Right. I think that they can go in and beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa, but again, that's going to be a tough game. It's going to be a physical game. They get a couple weeks at home to kind of lick their wounds should they get any, and they can really load up for that Texas game.
I like it. Yeah, I'll say what I think on that situation when we get to mine, but it's almost the same thing. All right, Will, yours, which we have the same pick, so I'll let you go first, and then I'll add on any thoughts I have.
We're fighting over the button here. I'm taking Ole Miss to play Georgia in the SEC title game. A couple of reasons there. We know how good Ole Miss is going to be on offense. Jackson Dart returns. Quinshon Judkins does leave. He did transfer to Ohio State, but you still got Ulysses Bentley, who I think is next up. I think he's a really good running back. He was just running back number 2 behind Quinshon Judkins. Lane Kiffin also brought in Henry Parrish Jr. from Miami and Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt from New Mexico to kind of help fill that Quinshon Judkins hole. That's a huge hole to fill. It's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot to do, but I think with those 3 running backs, they can run the ball enough. I just got through saying you still have to run the ball in the SEC, and Ole Miss can do it. And they do it in a number of ways. We've seen Jackson Dart run quite a bit. Jackson Dart, to me, it's hard for me to rank the top 3 quarterbacks, but he's right up there in the SEC with Quinn Ewers and Carson Beck. He's right there. And, their 3 biggest receiving targets come back from last year's team as well. Wide receivers Trey Harris and Jordan Watkins, and tight end Caden Prieskorn. Those 3 combined for over 2,000 receiving yards. It's almost the same offense from last year, and we know how good that Ole Miss offense was last year. On defense, their big addition is Walter Nolan, comes in from Texas A&M. But they also add some other SEC transfers in some really key areas. Former Alabama quarterback Trey Amos and former Arkansas linebacker Chris Paul Jr. both joined this Ole Miss defense, I should say. And I think this Ole Miss defense will be better with Pete Golding running it. And I think Ole Miss is primed to make their first ever SEC championship game. Their schedule, it's not easy. No SEC schedule is easy. They've got a really tough stretch. October, November, they have to go to South Carolina in October. We know how tough that is. Then they travel to LSU the following week. They host Oklahoma. They travel to Arkansas, and then they host Georgia. So that 6-week stretch is a tough stretch for them, but I think they're good enough to get through it. And remember, they don't have to win all these games. They can afford to drop a game. The way the SEC is, they might can afford to drop 2 and be 10-2 and still qualify for the SEC title game.
Yeah, and I'll just add here, or Ralph, you go first. Any thoughts on Ole Miss before I kind of get into my spiel?
Look, I had Ole Miss as my second team to get it there. I think they're super talented this year. Got better defensively. That was the weak suit last year. And actually, the past 2 years, they just had to go to shootouts with teams, and can they make a 1 or 2 stops toward the end of the games and just complete it finally? You look at that LSU game last year. Bryce, you were there, obviously, but an absolute shootout. Ole Miss makes a few plays at the end of the game to secure the win. But yeah. I think this is a year that Ole Miss could really make a run for it. You don't have to play Alabama this year. That has been their weak suit for the last decade. Every time they play Alabama, it has been the hardest game for them to win. You don't play them this year. You start off the season pretty easily. You don't really play anyone till South Carolina, honestly, in my opinion. I mean, you get Kentucky at home. That helps out a lot. You're not going to Kentucky. You're not having to, it's a 12 o'clock kickoff. I guess it wouldn't matter anyway. Kentucky at night is a little harder than Kentucky at day or at 12 o'clock. So I've always been on the Ole Miss train. I like Jackson Dart. Obviously, Trey Harris coming back was massive for Ole Miss. That dude's a freak. He's a freak athlete. Yeah, and I like what Will said, though. Losing Judkins, that's hard. That's a big loss. I mean, no matter who you have back there, he's not Quinshon Judkins. I mean, that dude he's an absolute freak of nature at running back. Since his freshman year, he's been dominating. So I like Ole Miss. I just don't know if that 6-week stretch is going to be able, if they come out, undefeated in that situation.
I'll say this: if Ole Miss doesn't beat themselves, they should find themselves in Atlanta. I think that's kind of the whole story of Ole Miss in this season. I think we talked about this we may have talked about this a week or two ago, but I'll say this, and we're going to talk about it next week a little bit. To me, Ole Miss this season's a disappointment if you don't end up in Atlanta. This is probably the deepest roster that Ole Miss has had in a long time. Definitely the deepest roster that Lane Kiffin has had in his time in Oxford. So I'll say this: I think Georgia Ole Miss. That's my pick for the SEC title game, and I'll even add here. I think Ole Miss beats Georgia at home on November the 9th. And I think Georgia turns around and wins the SEC title game. I think you could see two loss teams in the SEC title game, or a 1-loss Ole Miss and a 2-loss Georgia, because I think Georgia could also lose at Texas. I think they're going to be really focused for the Alabama game. I think that's going to be a game they have circled. But I don't know. I mean, I like Ole Miss this season. I think that this is the year you have to make a move. If you don't make the playoff, it's a massive, massive disappointment. Like if you don't make the playoff with this team. And I'm going to go ahead and throw this out here. And Will, I know I didn't let you give your winner, but I'm going to throw it back to you here in a second. If Ole Miss does not make the playoff here, we're going to get hypothetical. This is going to go down a train. We don't need to discuss it. I'm just going to let it be clipped and move. If Ole Miss does not make the playoff and Billy Napier is fired, I think Florida aggressively pursues Lane Kiffin to be the next head coach in Gainesville. Wow. That's my hot take for 2024. Maybe it's not super hot, but I do think Georgia Ole Miss, and I'm going Georgia to win.
If Florida doesn't heavily pursue Lane Kiffin, they need new leadership down there in Gainesville. Yeah. I mean, they have to. Yeah. But I'm taking Georgia to win the SEC title. And Bryce, you make a really good point about that game November 9th. That's going to be tough because that Florida game, no matter what the outcome is, it is taxing. It's a rivalry game. It's a very emotional game for Georgia. And Ole Miss, I think, gets Georgia a really good time. They get them at home. They get them coming off that Florida game. On paper, I think Georgia should win it, but I'm not going to make a pick for that game yet. But I've got Georgia beating them in the SEC title game. And one more note on Ole Miss's schedule. I'm very interested to see how they handle the bright lights Saturday, September 14th at Wake Forest on the CW. Oh, can they?
I will not be watching that game. I can tell you that.
Can they handle the pressure of playing a primetime game on the CW?
Oh, jeez. Is the
CSI making Ole Miss schedule these ACC games?
Is CSI Miami before that or after that?
I don't know. Maybe Hawaii.
You're the one that knows what's on the CW. Nobody else even knows.
I don't know. Andy Griffith might
watch growing up on CW.
I might have to watch a little bit of Mary Mayberry action before I watch that game. Who knows? Obviously, though, we go to the picks. Georgia, Ole Miss for Will and I. We both pick Georgia to move on. Ralph goes Georgia, Texas. Picks Georgia to be the SEC champion in 2024. All right, we move on to the next conference here. No, Gavin, we're not on. We're in the middle of a live show right now. So moving to the next conference, Ralph, I have no clue what we're going to. I'll look in here a second so I can set us up.
ACC.
We're going to the All Coast Conference. I do not believe that Stanford or Cal will be mentioned. People might riot if SMU.
You mentioned it, so way to go.
So
congrats.
There we go.
We're starting with Wake Forest. So I mean,
I picked this team on Monday as my sleeper team. You put them in the ACC title game. Walk us through your ACC title matchup.
I got North Carolina State and Clemson. I think North Carolina State's got the best chance schedule-wise. You get Tennessee, obviously. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter toward conference games. You go at Clemson, and then you have a walk-through schedule for the rest of the year until you go to at Georgia Tech, at North Carolina. And I think in both those games, you have a strong outcome of finishing easily undefeated or a one-loss ACC team. I'm not saying that whoever else plays, obviously, could be undefeated. We don't know. We didn't think Louisville would be very good last year, and obviously they were who they were. I like NC State's team. Obviously, you bring in Grayson McCall, a veteran quarterback. Obviously, playing from the Sun Belt, he has some great experience in big games. He's shown out that he could play no matter who he's against. He's just a talented quarterback in general. I like what NC State's done defensively in the past few years. They're a strong defense team. They beat Clemson last year, and a lot of people didn't believe they could. But I'll switch it to Clemson real quick. Obviously, Cade Klubnik. I've been on him since he walked on campus. when he was in high school, I guess. I've been saying he's a great quarterback. I'm standing by that comment. I still think he's super talented and he is just dynamic because the way he can throw it and run at the same time. He's really just a super good quarterback to watch play. If you haven't watched him play before, Phil Maffa, he's an absolute monster of a running back. Once he gets going, he's hard to stop. Clemson always has a strong front seven. Obviously, I think what they're going to be doing this year will probably cause issues for teams. But with NC State's schedule, I got them going into Charlotte at the end of the season facing Clemson.
And Ralph, a lot of what you just said there is like I'll say a lot of what you said is, look, if they regardless, you can make the you can make the playoff if you win the ACC. If NC State rolls into that playoff game with a win against Tennessee on their resume, you make a very strong case to be the number 2 ACC team, regardless of what happens in Charlotte. So, Ralph, maybe it cut out and I didn't hear you. Who is your ACC champion for 2020?
I didn't say that one. I'm going Clemson.
Oh, there we go. I like it. That's good analysis, though. Clemson's really good defensively. NC State's very veteran-led team. Casey Concepcion is a beast. He's very, very good. And I think it could be fun to watch him. All right, we move over to Will's ACC title game pick. A little bit different. Rock with us and tell us what you're thinking.
A little bit different, but it's chalk. Clemson, Florida State. As Pete is making himself known here, let's just get him out of here. Clemson, Florida State. I think these two teams are hands down the two best in the conference. Mike Norvell worked wonders in the transfer portal this offseason and really reloaded, brought in a lot of new pieces. But I want to start with Clemson because there's been a lot of talk about Clemson and Bryce, I see you also like Florida State, so you can talk more about them. I think Clemson is going to have the biggest turnaround of any team in the ACC this year, which is strange to say about a team that won 9 games last year. I think Clemson is going to be back. I think having Cade Klubnik back for his second year as a starter, working with Garrett Riley for a second year as the offensive coordinator, I think that's going to elevate this offense in a big way. I think getting increased production and productivity from the wide receiver room is going to help out a lot. I mean, that receiver room last year was one of the worst in the country. One of the worst. They couldn't be much worse this year in 2024. They got to be just a little bit better, and I think that'll go a long way for them. And defensively, we know what they bring. Ralph mentioned it. Peter Woods and TJ Parker on the defensive line are 2 hands-down NFL players. They are going to wreak havoc all year long. They're going to make it hard for teams to run the ball, going to make it extremely hard for teams to run the ball, take away the running game. And Barrett Carter and RJ Mickens deciding to come back helps him out in the linebacker and safety rooms in a big way. I think Clemson is going to win the ACC. I think they're going to beat Florida State twice and kind of just cruise on into the playoff and be the Clemson that everybody remembers Clemson being.
Yeah, I like it. That sounds solid. I mean, when you look, Clemson defensively is probably on paper the best defense in the conference. Like I think that I would like to say that that's a pretty widely accepted statement, amongst non-rock dwellers. But I do believe that when you look at that front seven, like it's going to be hard to beat them and line up and beat them. And then Will obviously picked Clemson to win. So Ralph and Will, different championship games, but they both pick the Tigers, which is hilarious because Ralph, throw mine up there. I don't even have Clemson in this thing. I am telling you, I'm going to drink the Kool-Aid. I am going to smoke the Cuban cigar, and I'm taking the Miami Hurricanes
To win it?
To win the ACC over Florida State. And I think Miami's going to beat Florida State twice. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Look, this is the game that when Miami joined the conference, everyone wanted to see these two programs battle it out. I'm excited to see what Miami can do this season. I will tell you this. I'm a strong, strong believer in Cam Ward. Like, I believe that Cam Ward is going to be the dynamic playmaker, the dynamic guy that Miami has needed at the quarterback position, and going to be able to provide that consistently. Look, Mario Cristobal still has, in my opinion, a ways to go as an in-game manager. He still has a ways to go with, being able to manage the ebbs and flows of the game. A large portion of the fan base that's watching our show right now knows exactly what I'm talking about, and they're going to wreak havoc with that, meme of Christian Leary diving into the end zone a lot. But I think this is the year that Miami's roster, it's just way too talented. And eventually, when you knock on the door enough, it's got to open. And I think this is the year it opens. I think Miami plays Florida State. I have said this about Florida State. I think they're a 9 to 10 win team this season. This is why I'm picking Miami over Florida State, solely off this. Maybe it's opinion. I don't think it's fact. If I'm down by 10 entering the fourth quarter, who do I trust more getting me a win? I trust Cam Ward more than I trust DJU. That's who I trust more. I think Florida State's going to be run heavy. I think they're going to depend on two backs that they have that are very talented. DJU is going to have to manage the game well, but how much at this point in his career is how high is his ceiling really? Like that's going to be my biggest thing. So I'm going Cam Ward and the Canes. I think they've got a dynamic defense. They lost Kitchens and Williams to the draft, but this is a veteran cornerback room. It is middle linebacker, Mr. Francisco, that I don't know how to say his last name, but Francisco's returning, and he's a dude. And so I really like Miami in this one. I'm going with the Canes over the Seminoles for the ACC title. And that's where I sit with it. And maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's unpopular. But at some point, we've got to stop acting like it can't happen in Coral Gables. It can. And I just think that this is maybe the year where it pops off for them. So I like Miami as your ACC champion in 2024 over Florida State. And I'm thinking they're going to beat them twice. Any thoughts on the Canes from either of you fellas?
Not on the Canes, but just before we move on from the ACC, you brought up, you threw out the word rock dweller. I was talking to a rock dweller tonight, and this will get the comments fired up. He was willing to make that plus 3,300 bet on North Carolina to make the playoff. So there you go. Those are the people that
considering him a rock dweller.
Wow.
What?
Are you considering him a rock dweller?
Oh yeah. He watches one team, and they're not in the ACC.
I understand he watches one.
Hey, Austin, Miami starts off 9-0. You got to tune in tomorrow night when you want to hear what happens when Miami heads to Atlanta.
Bryce, I think you need to apologize to all your Tech fans. They're upset.
I don't apologize to anybody for anything.
They're upset. There's no Georgia Tech on this list at all.
No. But look, I mean, we'll talk here real quick about the ACC. I mean, look, there's tons of dark horse candidates. I mean, this conference, and we're going to talk about the Big 12. We're going to talk about the Big 12 later. It's very similar. Like Georgia Tech. Let me go through a couple more teams. Not Boston College or Cal. I'll throw up.
SMU.
Georgia. Let's be real. Georgia Tech, SMU, Louisville. Like, you mentioned NC State. I'd put them in that category for me. Those are all teams that could just sneak up and start playing really well. Virginia Tech is obviously a trendy pick for a lot of people. This conference, this is just our guesses, our predictions, our opinions, and what we feel like, here on August, whatever today's date is, August 15th, I think it is. I don't even know. 14th. That, Clayton says it's wrong. Apparently Clayton has a crystal ball. Bailey says Mario will make sure they don't start 9-0. Maybe he might. I think that you could lose 2 to 3 games in conference and maybe still win this ACC title, depending on what happens.
And that's what we've said. To make the playoff out of this conference, you may have to win it. Just because you get to the conference title game does not mean you're going to make the playoff. That's just how much this conference is going to eat itself alive.
I can see it being a 1-loss ACC champion against a 2 to 3 loss ACC runner-up.
And then you have the question becomes: is a 3-loss SEC team better than a 2-loss or 3-loss ACC team?
Yes.
Time to bring out the resumes, folks. I cannot.
We got to even discuss.
Absolutely.
Clayton says FSU, Virginia Tech, FSU wins 30-24. Well, you don't even have Georgia Tech in there. So, I mean, I don't want to hear it. So, yeah, that's the ACC. Let's move along. Next conference.
You just brought them up, Bryce. Might as well go Big 12. I got Texas Tech in Central Florida.
Jesus. Well, I'm not watching that one. I'll tell you that. No, go ahead, Ralph.
Look, I'm high on Texas Tech this year. I really like what they've built this past year. Obviously, the recruiting class was strong this past year. They have a good quarterback. The schedule's really favorable from this year. I think for both these teams, honestly. Central Florida's got a nice schedule. Texas Tech's got a nice schedule. You got at Oklahoma State toward the end of the season. Could be a trap game for OK State. Obviously, we're used to seeing Bedlam the last game of the year. No Bedlam this year, upsetting. I have a feeling that Texas Tech is going to make a run this year. I've been high on them all season. I really like what they've done. I like this team. I've been using them on the college football game. Obviously, it's just a video game, but it's fun. It's just a fun team to really Lubbock, Texas. Obviously, you go back to when I picked them as my sleeper team for the Big 12, but I mean, I have been sleeping all the way to the Big 12 championship game. They have not been there in a very long time. They obviously haven't won one in a very long time. I don't think they won one when Crabtree was there. I don't think.
I don't know.
They did not.
They did not. This team right here is exciting to watch. Obviously, the receiving core is about 3 or 4 times better than it was last year. You bring in Micah Hudson, true freshman, 5-star receiver, Josh Kelly, elite receiver from Washington State. You got a good tight end group. Running backs are talented. This team's just fun to watch this year. And obviously, the Big 12 is just going to beat up on each other, just like we said the ACC is. I think Texas Tech's one of those teams that can just slip right through the gaps and be a 2-loss, 1-loss ACC team that's sitting there in I don't know, where do they play their conference championship game? Is it Dallas?
I don't know.
Is it AT&T
Dallas?
Stadium? Yeah, it's AT&T Stadium. Yeah,
AT&T Stadium.
yeah. This is a team. Both these teams are like, 2 teams that could go under, just kind of under the radar for until the last 2 weeks of the season, saying they're the top of the AC or the top of the Big 12, and they could possibly be waiting on each other in Dallas. I like UCF though. I think Will and I both have UCF. I know why he has them. Obviously, they bring in a good quarterback. You finally get, Gus has someone he can really kind of work with that I think he likes more than John Rice Plumlee was there. Obviously, Plumlee was really talented, but he's kind of stayed injury prone and threw the ball, too many interceptions. I think, UCF is going to be fun to watch. They always are. The bounce house is exciting. They get Colorado and at Florida, and then you got Cincinnati at Iowa State. That's a tough little stretch there. I don't think Cincinnati's really that hard of a game, but you go, you play them at home after you just played a hard game at Florida. Can Central Florida keep it up? Can they stay healthy? That's the big question mark for me, but I still think they're a really good team to be there.
Yeah, I like it, Ralph. I do believe that when you look, I mean, that's look. Per Athlon Sports, Texas Tech came in as the 9th ranked team in the Big 12. So, I mean, it's a reach. It's a reach. UCF came in as the 10th. Like you have number 9 and number 10.
10th? Okay, yeah. They have lost
Hold on.
all credibility.
I want to say one thing real quick.
Go ahead.
Back in 2020, I reached on a World Series team, a playoff team.
Wasn't a real year, but that's fine.
Look, I reached on a playoff team for the baseball. And y'all joked on me, and they won the World Series 3 years later.
It's 2020. It doesn't count.
I have no clue who you're talking about.
I said the Rangers could be a playoff team, and they ended up being the worst team. They won the World Series 3 years later. I was like, I know that's a reach, obviously, but I've reached further back then. So why not reach again? The Big 12 is just a big question mark, honestly, with me this year.
I would tell you this: teams 1 through 10 could all find themselves in this conference title game. And Will, hand it over to you. Ralph, who's winning this? Texas Tech or UCF?
I got Texas Tech.
This is homerism if I've ever seen it.
My shirt, my visor coming in.
Get ready for some more.
Yes,
Get
sir.
ready for some more
Let's
homerism.
go. You did not just change
Last
it.
second change. I made a last second
God.
change. I first had Oklahoma State. I'm changing to West Virginia, taking on UCF in the conference title game. I've talked about UCF ad nauseum. I like them plus 750 to win the Big 12. Pete agrees. He comes up here in full agreement that Gus Malzahn is going to win a Big 12 title with KJ Jefferson at quarterback. And it's not just the offense. The defense is going to be much improved. They've got Gus went out and hired a national champion defensive coordinator to lead his defense this year. Ted Roof, new DC at UCF. I love UCF for a lot of reasons, but I'm going West Virginia because Neil Brown, what he did last year, he really evolved as a head coach. He was kind of known as an air raid guy, going to spread it out and throw it all the time. They didn't do that last year. They won 9 games. They were ground and pound. They were 4th in the country in rushing. And that big rushing attack, their top 2 rushers are back, Jaheim White and C.J. Donaldson. They're back. They're going to run the ball they're going to run the ball well again. Garrett Green is back at quarterback, a guy that can really take that next step and be one of the top quarterbacks in the country, I think. Last year had a big year, threw for 2,400 yards, 16 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions. Also ran for over 700 yards and 13 scores. Really good last year. I think he can build on that and be better. Defense was a problem a bit for West Virginia. A lot of it was depth. They went out, hit the portal hard, added to that depth. But they got to the passer a lot last year. They led the Big 12 in sacks with 33. I think it's more of the same in 2024. So I'm going UCF West Virginia, and I'm taking UCF to beat West Virginia.
I like it. I'm here for it. I think that Will, when you look at just kind of what this UCF team is, KJ Jefferson is a dude. I think that it's going to be really fun to watch him in Gus Malzahn's offense. A large portion of the people watching the show that'll come across this, they continue to fixate on the Gasparilla Bowl last year when UCF lost. Completely different teams.
Also,
what happened last bowl season has zero to do what happens in 2024.
You got to remember, Gus Malzahn cares nothing about bowl games. He's proven that.
He has proven that, much to the dismay of Will. Will has, and this is per Athlon Sports, Will has number 10 against number 6. And, here. So it's getting a little more reasonable in that sense. Now, I will tell you.
But I'm picking number 10.
You're picking number 10. So Ralph has picked Texas Tech to win it. Will has picked UCF. And now we'll come back down to out of Candyland, and we'll get down here.
I got one comment though about West Virginia. Will people don't realize how good C.J. Donaldson really is? That is a massive running back. He's 6'2", 240.
Garrett Green's probably a top 25 quarterback in the country too.
Yeah, 5'11", 200 pounds. Your running back's bigger than you. It's just really funny to me. But I mean, I like West Virginia too. Will I'm a big Neil Brown fan, obviously, but I think this is the year that Neil Brown sets and said that he can be a Power 5 coach.
I like it. All right, I'm going to rock and roll with mine. So here we go. I flip-flopped here. I was thinking a lot of different things. Ultimately, fellas, I went number 1 against number 3 in the preseason. I'm going Utah against Oklahoma State. I think that Oklahoma State's run game, they've got the best running back. They've got the best college running back in the country. Now, when we look back at this, there might be a better pro running back 5-6 years from now. But Ollie Gordon in this rushing attack, that can win the Big 12, in my opinion. Alan Bowman, he's playing in his 45th year of college football. We'll see what he can do. I think that it's a very high floor type of player, not necessarily the highest ceiling in Alan Bowman. But I think Oklahoma State finds themselves in the Big 12 title game just based on the fact of it's a good defense. Mike Gundy's a veteran coach. Mike Gundy's probably one of the most underrated coaches in America. And I say that a lot, but I think we always kind of forget about what he's done and how he has put Oklahoma State, a program with not necessarily flush with what programs, especially in that area, might have in terms of money and resources. And he's done a heck of a job with it. And then I'm going with the newcomers. Yes, you have 2 quarterbacks that have combined college football playing experience of a freshman in high school. That's how many years they'll have played college football combined. Cam Rising is going to be playing in his 6th season of college football. It's going to be very interesting to watch as a guy who just didn't really play last year. We obviously had the injury. But Utah and Kyle Whittingham, strong defensive team. I think they're positioned well to join this Big 12 conference. Smash mouth football. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how they I'm going to use a word here, matriculate themselves into the Big 12. You got a lot of different things. This conference is, like we said, very much one that can eat itself from within. I flirted with Kansas. That was my pick. When I talked about a sleeper pick, I flirted with West Virginia here. I'm not as high on Kansas State, probably because they just beat me in my College Bowl 25 dynasty when they came to Tulane. You're not going to see any Colorado prediction here. I don't think they're going to be good this year. But I'm going to Oklahoma State to win the Big 12 and make the college football playoff. I really like what they bring to the table. I think it's I just think this is a conference where, look, guys, we have picked between the three of us. We picked the number 1, number 3, number 6, number 10, and number 9 teams to be in it. And then that just goes to show you this is a conference that's got a little bit of everything. We could end up in October and it could be Arizona State versus Houston. The fighting Willie Fritzes could be getting ready to play for a Big 12 title. I don't think so. But look, seriously, here's your top 10, the predicted order of finish per athlon. Utah, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Kansas, Arizona, West Virginia, Iowa State, TCU, Texas Tech, UCF. I don't think that anybody can give me a concrete reason why one of those 10 teams will absolutely not make it to the Big 12 title game. Outside of that is where you really start to get into concerns about roster. But it's a conference that's going to beat itself up, and the winner's probably going to find themselves as the fourth ranked team that last bye in the college football playoff. Does Colorado have the best quarterback and wide receiver in the Big 12?
Well, no, that's not the Big 12, so that's the Big 1,112.
Big 11, 12.
No.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
I don't know. That's a good question.
Who's Jalen Daniels throwing to this year? I'll just take him instead.
Jalen Daniels pretty good. Fafita's
really
good.
Arizona, 100%.
Arizona might have the best quarterback in the Big 12, not the country. Here we go.
Going back to Utah, Oklahoma State, the big concern for me for both of these teams is the quarterback position. Yeah, they've got experience, but I mean, Cam Rising's been hurt nearly every year. The one year he was healthy, they did go out and play in the Rose Bowl. Did they win it or did they? I think they lost to Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
But they went out and made the Rose Bowl. Alan Bowman has basically hung around and done a whole lot of nothing in the Big 12. It seems like he's been there the whole time. So if Cam Rising gets injured, I'm worried because the depth behind them showed last year. They don't have a ton of it. Alan Bowman played all last year for Oklahoma State and dropped some games that they probably should have won. You've got experience, but you haven't shown me much between those two. So that's what concerns me with those. No concerns about the running game or the defense for either of those teams. If you like betting totals, bet the under for a lot of the games these two teams play.
Yeah. Brennan Presley, watch out for him. Wide receiver for Oklahoma State. He's apparently pretty good per people. So there we go. Per people. Big 12. There you have it. All right, we're gonna transition into the final one here, guys. And I went ahead and consolidated it into just one banner, and we'll each talk about it. So Ralph, we'll start with you here, and you can still give your pick. We all picked Oregon, Ohio State. This is about as chalk as it gets, in my opinion. I think there's Oregon, Ohio State, and I'll just kind of lead it here with you, Ralph. I think there might be a gap between everyone after that, and not some seismic gap, but I think these are two of the best rosters, not just in the Big Ten, but probably two top 5 rosters, top 10 rosters in the country. Who are you picking out of this and why?
I'm gonna go Oregon. I think Oregon's just got a good offense overall, and Dan Lanning's done a tremendous job this year in just establishing that his team wants to be a better defensively overall, not just be so we always think of Oregon, you think of offense. Dan Lanning's turned the program around to a defensive powerhouse almost. Everyone talked about last year, Colorado, Oregon, that Colorado put some points up on Oregon's defense, and they just got absolutely whacked. I think Oregon's just they're one of the best teams, obviously, this year. And for a team to transition to a conference with Ohio State and Michigan, they'll be just fine. I think the only team that's transitioning into the Big Ten that has a chance to do anything other than go, 6-6 or 7-5. I like Oregon's offense. I like their whole entire, rosters set up this year. Obviously, a great quarterback, Dylan Gabriel, coming over. Tess Johnson, obviously, one of the top receivers on their team. And Ohio State, look, you lose your quarterback. You bring in Will Howard. You bring in Will Howard, you bring in Quinshawn Judkins. You have an amazing running back room, an incredible receiving room. Their offense looks great. You bring in Chip Kelly's now the offense coordinator there.
Yep.
Ohio State looks like the premier team to win their conference outright easily and be in the national championship, and they should be. Honestly, they should be every single year. Their conference really should not have a problem with them, but they've been struggling with Michigan the past few years. And what Bryce said is true. It's literally these are the top two teams. You have a slight gap between Michigan and Penn State, and there's a bigger gap between everybody else. That's just the truth. This is the only conference where there's 4 teams that just make this one conference lopsided. There are only there are only 4 teams, I think, in a single conference that could, that would be so good that make their conference look horrible on the backside. So
yeah,
I'm going Oregon, just because I think they're just really good. I mean, I know that's a basic statement, but they just truly are. You saw last year. I mean, they could have been a 1 loss to the Washington, and they could have beat Washington both times last year in a neutral site and on the road. They lost by 3 points, I think, both games.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of gets rid of the old adage of you can't beat a team twice in a season. I mean, that when we went into our conference title predictions last year and in season that week of, I think a lot of us brought up that kind of, I don't want to call it a wives' tale, but it's one of those things.
Yeah.
It's one of these things that we just say as sports fans. Well, it's hard to beat someone twice.
It is.
Will, you picked Oregon, Ohio State. Ralph picked Oregon to win the Big Ten. These two teams are going to face off on October the 12th. And we're going to see a preview of what we all here believe to be the Big Ten title game. How do you think? Well, I'll ask you this. Does the October 12th game have any bearing on what happens in December? And who do you think comes out on top?
I don't know that it necessarily does. As we sit here on August 14th, I give the edge to Oregon for that October 12th matchup, just because I get them at home. And we know Autzen Stadium is bonkers. It's one of the toughest places to play in the country. So I think the home field advantage could carry them there. But Ohio State, something's different about Ohio State this year. The way that Ryan Day went out and attacked in the transfer portal, upgrading at quarterback when he already had a decent quarterback in Kyle McCord, went and upgraded there, went and upgraded at running back, went out and got Chip Kelly to run his offense when offense was lacking last year, just went out and attacked in the portal and getting a new coordinator and just drastically improving this team, putting his foot on the gas and saying enough is enough. We're not going to take a backseat to Michigan anymore. And we're not going to take a backseat to anybody in the country for that matter. So I think Ohio State is going to win the Big Ten. Have to wait and see how they play before that regular season matchup against Oregon, before I really make a call there. But I think by the time they play the first week of December, both these teams will probably be in the top 4, and I think Ohio State will come out on top and could be that number 1 seed for the playoff.
Yeah, I mean, I think October 12th, Oregon wins. Autzen Stadium's going to be rocking. I mean, you look at Oregon's schedule. This is really kind of their welcome to the Big Ten game. I mean, you have a couple games before that. You're going to host Michigan State. They're going to play your Texas Tech Raiders at home. That's a non-con game. You're going to go to UCLA, but you've done that before. But this is your welcome to the Big Ten game. But this is also Ohio State's welcome to the new Big Ten game. And there's going to be a lot of pressure on Ryan Day to kind of go out there and I'll just say to not just beat Michigan. Like, I don't think it's national title or bust if you're being realistic. Now, there's going to be fans of Ohio State that say, yes, you got to go win the national title. But I definitely think that it's beat Michigan or else. Like, I don't think you can lose to Michigan, especially with what is perceived as a tier 2 Big Ten team. This year, not on that same level, wildly different coaching staff and a wildly different roster. One thing that stands out about Ohio State, though, fellas, 10 out of their 12 starters are going to be upperclassmen. That is absolutely crazy. I'm sorry, 11 out of their 12 starters are going to be upperclassmen. 8 of those are going to be seniors. This is a very veteran-heavy defense. They've played a lot of football. Like Will said, there might be something a little bit different this year. They might just be a little bit pissed off. Like, they might just be tired of this moniker of, we've got this wildly talented roster, but we can't do it. You flip it over the offensive side of the football, Quinshawn Judkins and Travion Henderson, guys, watching them play with an uber athletic quarterback and a Chip Kelly offense is going to be so much fun. Like, this is going to be must-watch TV no matter who they're playing. I'm excited to watch Ohio State play football this year. I think that this team will win the Big Ten title. I think that they roll in there 11-1. Oregon, whatever records you want to give them rolling in, but I do think Oregon beats them in the regular season. Ohio State wins, and I don't want to spoil it, but I do believe, because these are probably two of the top 4 teams in the country, in my opinion, heading into 2024. I think that the winner of this game is your number 1 seed, and that the loser is the number 5 seed. And we'll talk more about that on Monday when we get into our playoff predictions. But fellas, I really like where we sit here. August 14th, we're talking conference title. Ohio State's legit. Oregon is too. Oregon might have the more dynamic player at the quarterback position in Dylan Gabriel. Also, Evan Stewart is going to pop off this year. Kind of has been under the radar. Look, it's been so long since he transferred, we've kind of forgotten about it if you're not Ohio State or an Oregon fan and looking, at the Big Ten schedule. Evan Stewart's going to pop off. You mentioned there, Ralph, Tez Johnson's now got a running mate there that's really going to help him do a lot of things. So I'm excited to see what this conference does. And like we talked about, I think there's a gap. I think there's a gap everywhere else. There's some good teams, but if I'm not mistaken, Ralph is taking Oregon, Will's taking Oregon, and I'm taking Ohio State. No, Will's taking Ohio State. Will's taking Ohio State to win the Big Ten title game. So this will be fun. We're
talking about the Big Ten. I can't help myself. I cannot help myself. Watch out for the Iowa.
I was ready to take Will out the whole time. I hope no.
You look at their schedule. They don't play anybody. They only play Ohio State.
Watch your mouth.
If they can just get slightly better quarterback play,
we already talked about this on Monday. You saw what happened in their fall scrimmage.
I told you, Cade McNamara is not going to be the quarterback. If it's Brendan Sullivan, it's got to be better. It's a different scheme. Everything's different. They might sneak around. They might sneak around.
Watch out for the week 3 game, Will.
That's not a conference game.
It's not a conference game. It's a game you got to watch out for.
That's a tougher game. That's against Troy, and that's a tougher game than probably half their conference games.
They'll lose 2 straight to Ohio State and Washington.
And then they might go 10-2.
They'll find a way.
They might sneak around. Don't be surprised if you look up at the end of the year
like lose to Oregon or Ohio State in the Big Ten championship.
They don't have
40.
They won't make the Big Ten title game. They'll be the number 3, and they might be sitting there as ranked 11th or 12th. And we might be arguing for them to get the 11th spot.
I'll be arguing for Kennesaw State to get the spot over them.
I might argue for Mercer.
I'm telling you, we know their defense and their run game. If they can get a little bit better quarterback play, they're going to be right there. I'm telling you.
That seems like a good place to honestly end the show. I don't know how much more we could say on that, but hey, it's conference title games. We are a week away from best bets. We are just a couple of 5 days away from our playoff picks and our bracket reveals. So make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you're watching over on YouTube, we appreciate you. Subscribe, comment, like the video, set up notifications. We're going to be live every single Monday and Wednesday night throughout the season. And then obviously for the Georgia Tech fans tuning in, big show tomorrow night. You get to see, and I dropped a little Easter egg earlier in the show if you didn't pick it up. We're going to go through the schedule. I'm going to tell you how I feel about it. It's I'm torn. The original rough draft that I sent these two fellas, I've already changed it. So we'll see. We'll see what happens, but it's going to be a lot of fun. Make sure you stay tuned all season long. Shout out to Believe. Shout out to our presenting sponsor, betonline.ag. Every single best bet or every single line that you see, we're partnering with them for the 2024 season for them to be able to provide all of those lines, the most updated lines for you to be able to cash in on. He is Ralph Leary. My name is Bryce Koon. That is Will Manis. We appreciate you tuning into this edition of The Crowded Booth, and we'll see you next time.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.